South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster will announce Senator Lindsey Graham's replacement later this afternoon. Graham died Saturday night at the age of 71. Governor McMaster's appointment will finish out the rest of the senator's term, which ends in January. Graham served in Congress for more than 3 decades. He was elected to the Senate after first serving in the House. During his time in office, he focused on foreign politics and promoted a strong military. Senator Graham had a rocky relationship with President Trump. He initially refused to back him during his first run for office, but eventually became one of his strongest supporters.
When the pressure was on and the stakes were the highest, Lindsey Graham was at his best. And South Carolina, I think we will have. I think he's irreplaceable, like Governor McMaster said. We will carry on, but he's going to leave huge, huge shoes to fill.
The Washington, D.C. medical examiner says preliminary findings show the cause of death was likely a complex cardiovascular disease. Governor McMaster will announce an appointment to fill Graham's vacancy at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Meanwhile, remembrances for the senator are pouring in from all over the world. Graham was hailed as a friend to Ukraine. He met with President Volodymyr Zelensky twice in the week before his death. In a statement, Zelensky said, quote, "Lindsey was a true defender of freedom and the values that make our world safer," end quote. Graham was also a strong ally of Israel, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement, quote, "Israel has lost one of its greatest friends. America has lost a great patriot. I have lost a beloved friend."
Senator Graham was also seeking a 5th term in November. South Carolinians will vote in a special primary to determine who will replace him on the ballot. According to South Carolina law, the filing period for the special primary will open on July 21st and close on July 28th. After that, a special primary election will be held on August 11th. If no candidate gets 50% of the votes, a runoff election will be held on August 25th. The winner of the Republican special primary will face Democrat Annie Andrews come November.